Steve Michalik from New York is the surprise winner at the biggest national title in America. All the details of the 1972 AAU Mr. America coming up next on this episode of Bodybuilding History.
I will be forever the myth.
You're the king of kings,
There's always a pecking order. The little packers never mess with the big packers. So I'm a rooster, and he's a chicken, so to speak.
All right, welcome to another episode of Bodybuilding History. I'm John Hansen, the host of the Bodybuilding Legends podcast. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about the 1972 AAU Mr. America contest. The 1972 AAU Mr. America took place on June 10th, 1972 at the Masonic Auditorium in Detroit, Michigan. The contest was held in conjunction with the Senior National Weightlifting Championships and the Olympic Trials for Weightlifting. It was promoted by Clarence Johnson, and the contest featured 35 competitors, and this was the 34th annual edition of the AAU Mr. America contest, which began in 1939. Unlike previous years when the Mr. America contest was held over 2 days, this year the contest was held all on Saturday. 40 competitors originally signed up to compete in the Mr. America contest in 1972, but only 35 showed up. The prejudging began at 9 a.m., and for the first time ever, the public was allowed to watch the proceedings. The prejudging took place in a big ballroom at the Masonic Temple that had plenty of seats and a really big stage. The 35 competitors were brought out in several groups. They went through the quarter turns relaxed, and then all the competitors came out individually to do their individual posing routine. It was during this time that the judges were appraising each competitor for their muscularity, and they were also looking at the various body part awards as well as the overall Mr. America title. The prejudging took a total of 3 hours. The judges for the competition included Don Haley from the Southern Pacific Association, Dave Mayer, who came from the Mid-Atlantic Association, Ralph Countryman from Northern California, Herb Gowling from Washington, D.C., Robert Zemanski and Len Boslin, both from New Jersey, and Norm Rauch from Wisconsin. After the prejudging was over, all the competitors were interviewed by the judges, and by 5 p.m. that Saturday, all the tabulations were done and the winners were chosen. Then later that evening, they had the Mr. America finals. Each competitor went through their posing routine, and then the results were finally announced, first with the body part awards and the most muscular division, and then finally the overall title of Mr. America. The winner of the contest was Steve Michalik. Steve was a surprise winner because he had taken second place at the Junior Mr. America contest only a month earlier. But in that month's time, he made improvements to his physique, and he was awarded the title of overall Mr. America. Steve's 24 years old, he's married, and the year before, in 1971, Steve won the overall title of the AAU Mr. USA. Steve presented a very tall, symmetrical physique with a really small waist. He had great muscle mass and great symmetry, and was a real convincing winner for the judges. In second place was a very disappointed Pete Gromkowski from Rochester, New York. Pete had taken second place the year earlier in 1971 to Casey Viator, and he had also won the overall at the Junior Mr. America just 1 month earlier. So Pete was the odds-on favorite to win the title this year in 1972. This was a surprise to many because for the last 5 years, the winner of the AAU Junior Mr. America contest also won that year's Mr. America. So this streak was broken this year by Steve Michalik, who actually took second at the Junior America to Pete Gromkowski, but he was able to reverse that decision at the Mr. America 1 month later. Pete Gromkowski at the time was 26 years old. He did win the most muscular award that night at the Mr. America, and as I mentioned, he was the runner-up last year to Casey Viator, and this was his second time competing in the Mr. America contest. Jim Morris, originally from New York but now living in Los Angeles, was in third place. Jim was 36 years old, and he had already been training for 15 years. In 1967, Jim won the Junior Mr. USA and the Mr. New York State titles, and he won the Mr. California in 1970. Jim only took 7th place at the 1970 Mr. America, so he really made some great improvements to move up to 3rd place this year. Later that year in 1972, Jim also won the AAU Mr. USA overall title. Bill St. John from Glassboro, New Jersey dropped down to 4th place after placing in the top 3 in last year's Mr. America. Bill has a very muscular physique with really great abs, and he also took 2nd place to Steve Michalik at last year's Mr. USA contest. 5th place in the contest went to Ken Covington from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Ken was 23 years old, and he was a former Teenage Mr. America winner in 1968. He took 2nd place at the Junior Mr. USA and 3rd place at the Junior Mr. America in 1972 as well. Paul Hill from Los Angeles, California took 6th place. Paul only placed 19th at the 1970 Mr. America contest, so he's really made some great improvements in the last 2 years. Paul trained at Vince's gym in Ventura, California, and he had a very thick but symmetrical physique. Ron Thompson was in 7th place. Ron is from Flint, Michigan, 25 years old, married with 2 children. And Ron would be a future Mr. America winner as he would win the title 2 years later in 1974. Don Ross from Detroit, Michigan was in 8th place. Don trained at Armento's gym in Detroit. He's 25 years old, and he was a former Mr. Michigan winner. Don also won the Mr. Eastern States in 1972. Phil Stepaniak from Cincinnati, Ohio was in 9th place. Phil's 24 years old. He was the current Mr. Ohio and Mr. Midwest winner. And then rounding out the top 10 was Robert Bob Birdsong. Bob was 24 years old. He was formerly from Kentucky, but now he was living in Los Angeles, California. Bob also won the Mr. Physique USA title in 1972, and he was 2nd place in the Mr. California that year. As I mentioned before, the most muscular man title went to Pete Grimkowski with Steve Michalik in 2nd place. Jim Morris took 3rd, Ken Covington took 4th, and Bill St. John was in 5th. In the body part subdivisions, Jim Morris really cleaned up. He won Best Arms, Best Back, and Best Abdominals. Carl Smith, who only took 13th place in the contest, won the Best Legs Award. And Bill Sino from Chicago, who only took 11th place that year, he won the Best Chest Award. Bill was also a great power lifter, especially in the bench press competition. And then the final placings at the Mr. America contest in 1972 was Steve Michalik in 1st place, Pete Grimkowski in 2nd place, Jim Morris from California in 3rd place, Bill St. John in 4th place, and Ken Covington in 5th place. It's interesting that Steve Michalik, the overall winner, did not win any of the body part awards that year, but he did take 2nd to Pete Grimkowski in the most muscular division. Another interesting fact was that Steve did not travel to London to compete in the NAVA Mr. Universe that year, as many previous Mr. America winners had done. In fact, Steve did not compete in the NAVA Mr. Universe until 3 years later when he went in it and won the tall class at the amateur division. So the 1972 AAU Mr. America was a big success with a brand new star in the physique world, Steve Michalik. It's interesting that after this contest, Steve kind of stepped away from the bodybuilding scene for several years. In fact, he was featured quite prominently in the book Pumping Iron, in which they did the interview with him in 1973. The book Pumping Iron came out in 1974. And in that book, Steve is almost unrecognizable because he had lost pretty much all of his muscle mass as he was talking in the book about the demands that the bodybuilding lifestyle made on him and the incredible diet and training programs he had to go through in order to be a winner at the Mr. America contest. Steve, however, as I mentioned, did return to competition in 1975. He went through a terrible car accident in which a garbage truck rolled over his car, almost paralyzing him. But he was able to come back from that very unfortunate accident and compete in the IFBB Professional League in the late 70s and early 80s. So that's it for this episode of Bodybuilding History. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Check out the Bodybuilding Legends podcast each week on your favorite podcast streaming service. And check out the website bodybuildinglegendshow.com for all our previous episodes. This is John Hansen. I'll see you next time for another edition of Bodybuilding History.